for August 20th, 2025. First item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as distributed.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any comments, edits to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, I can't, for some reason, the internet here isn't very good, so I can't actually see anyone except for Steve. I'm going to presume that that was a go. Okay,
Yes.
Next up, so I'm going to ask you to say aye next time so I can actually hear. So next up is approval of the minutes from August 6th and August 6th, at the two meetings that occurred 2 weeks ago.
Ellie, before somebody
I'll entertain
moves,
it.
I read through them just to get caught up to speed. And on the August 6th, it says the meeting was held from 3:30 to 5, but throughout the document, the notes indicate a 3 o'clock time frame. Like 3:06 or 3:09, not a 3:30 time.
Oh, okay. We'll have a look at that. That does not seem
Yeah.
right.
I don't think we've had a 3 o'clock meeting for quite a while. It can't be accurate.
Yeah,
When was
the
the first
Yeah.
meeting? 2:30?
2:30 to about 3:15.
Yeah,
But
we're
that
talking
was
about
all-
the meeting, the one we went into executive session.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
and so there wasn't
Zapata,
really a
were you talking
recording
about
for
the-
it.
Yeah, were you talking about the first meeting or the second meeting, Zapata?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's the one
The
that
first-
said 3:30 to 5 o'clock.
So that was the second meeting.
Okay.
That was the second meeting. Okay.
And maybe I was being dyslexic in the process of reading through it. I'm not sure.
No, you are quite right. It is talking about times that don't seem to be correct. So we should, maybe you guys can vote to approve the first one, and then I will send it back to the minute taker to update the timings on the second, on the times.
Right, and the first one
What do you
was
guys
the
think?
one that essentially went straight into executive session, pretty much.
Yep.
Well, I move we approve the agenda for the 2:30 to 3 whatever meeting.
Second?
There's
One,
discussion.
yeah, one minor point, it doesn't really matter to me, but I'm listed as at large instead of vice chair.
Oh.
Okay, well,
Yeah, yeah, that's
I
what
can
happens
make
when
that
you,
change.
yeah, that's what happens when you get the chair to take
That
care
was
of the
Steve.
minutes.
All right, I will upload the approved minutes after the vote with that friendly amendment. Okay, so all in favor of the minutes for the first meeting of August 6th, please say aye so that I can hear you.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So that sounded unanimous. So there was no one opposed and no abstentions. Okay, next up is public comment. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on to the chair report. Steve.
Yes, so I do want to put on the screen one item, but before I do that, I just kind of wanted to tell you about Zapata, who has joined this call. She as I believe I spoke with each of you, Jeff Glassberg is got his hands full with his paying job and basically is asked to step down. And so Ellie and I had a brief discussion, and we agreed that we should ask if Zapata would be interested in joining as a member of the executive committee. When I spoke with her a few weeks ago, she wanted some time to think about it, and that time period is still there. So I'm sure I'll be hassling about that shortly, because if for any reason she's wants to, move on, Ellie and I have got some other ideas on what we might want to do, but I think I'd be really interested in getting that sorted out. But I don't want to put you on the spot now, Zapata. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about you before we move on?
I mean, most of you know me. I've been sitting as a representative of Ripton on the board now for I don't know, I think it's 2 years-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
I live up in Ripton. I'm one of the off-the-grid properties that would be non-conforming, and trying to find solutions for high-speed internet was a big challenge. And so when the previous representative wanted to step down, Allison, our town clerk, approached me. And I feel very strongly that high-speed internet needs to reach the rural communities and those that are underserved. And so in that respect, I agreed to do that. I will say that I'm very, very busy during the growing season because I work in the world of wetlands. And so that's a consideration, and that's a discussion I'll be having with Steve and Ellie just around scheduling, so that if I was to say commit to this position, that I'm able to attend on a regular basis and be fully committed. So that's kind of where my hat is right now.
Thank you. And then I just have one little item here to share with you, and the fact that Ellie can't see it doesn't really matter because she knows this all too well. So this is just the schedule, the tentative timeline that's been in play for quite some time. And I guess I did want to use this as an opportunity to ask Ellie about it because we are coming up on the end of the review process here on August 22nd. And then this coming Monday, there's a VCBB special board meeting. I don't know what's going to happen on that day, Ellie. Is there something related to BEAD on that, or is there something else at play?
Well, yes, the subject of that special board meeting is for the board to review and approve the staff's recommendations around the BEADS Volume 2, as I understand it. And as I said in email a day or so ago, we haven't heard anything from Team VCBB, and I can discuss more about that in executive session.
Right, good. And so it's probably safe to assume that that review happens on the 22nd. It's probably going to be happening in executive session too.
Well, it's not really clear because as you see, the very next day, they need to open up for public comment. And so they're going to need to provide some substance for public comment, one would think. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, the last I heard on that, it sounded like the staff also weren't quite sure what they were going to do.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, it's imminent, and from our executive director's mouth, it's still uncertain on what happens next, but there are some future steps. I've been sending on to you, Zapata. I haven't copied you on these just because I didn't think of it. There have been several states where Elon Musk's low Earth orbit satellite company is none too happy about some of the pending decisions being made in Virginia, and also I don't even know where the other one was, but it's not surprising. Yeah, I think, and I'm hopeful that the approach that's being taken by Virginia is similar to the approach that will be taken by the VCBB, but I could be wrong. So we'll wait and see what happens on that. That is my chair report.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So moving into executive director reports, I think a lot of what I am working on and have been working on is further down on the agenda. I think that probably the single biggest item on my to-do list for the next couple of weeks is this VCBB long drop program, where we have quite a bit to discuss later on. And also we have the ongoing 2024 audit. So when things come through from the auditor, I pretty much drop everything where possible to be able to respond quickly. But we'll cover that later in the agenda as well. So those are my top priorities at the moment. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Okay, so let's move into section 6, which is calls for decision or key discussions. So the very first item up is I've invited Ashley from London Middlebury to come, because if you recall, well, Zapata, you weren't here, but I guess you read the draft minutes. But I teed up this discussion the last time we met to just talk in general about trying to, well, I think part of this is marketing and part of this is more broadly to be talking about board engagement and how we can use our governing board members to the best effects in our member towns. So one slice of that is how we might be able to use our governing board members as marketing resources. And so I wanted to have, and then we discussed this as well in our last weekly or bi-weekly meeting with London Middlebury, in part because there's a number of events coming up this fall and there simply is not enough. I do not have enough time to be staffing them, or there are times that I can't make it. And so we wanted to accelerate this part of the conversation to see what we might wish to do as an executive committee and as a governing board as it relates to these events over the next couple of months. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Ellie, and hello, everyone. So yeah, we've been having these conversations as Maple Broadband faces the increasing demands for community presence. It's very clear that all of the traditional areas where Maple Broadband marketing is present, all of the competitors are there as well. And that's no surprise to us in the digital marketing realm, in the print, which we're increasing. And even in Front Porch Forum, you might be seeing that Fidium is it's really like we're increasing Front Porch Forum because they're increasing Front Porch Forum. But the one area where we have the most opportunity to claim customers, set ourselves apart, and really live up to the brand that we're presenting, even though if you recall from the research, that's not the number one thing that folks are looking for. They are comparing the speeds and the quality and the reliability, but it's the community events. And so there are a lot of opportunities for Maple Broadband to be present in the community now through the end of the fall. There's Virgin's Day is this weekend that we are sponsoring, but without volunteer support, we weren't able to have a booth there, but it would have been really lovely to have a booth there at Virgin's Day. And Ellie just hosted the pop-up event at Lulu. There are a number of markets and other opportunities presented by the Better Middlebury Partnership, there had been a potential opportunity to sponsor the malt race and then have a table there, but we opted not to do that because if we can't have the physical presence to also go with the banners, it's not quite that advantageous for us at the stage of this brand. And so just wanted to have this conversation with the executive committee and strategize together, brainstorm it together about how we can potentially increase board engagement, what those barriers might be. And we definitely have some hunches on what those are, and just kind of even beginning with lack of confidence in the messaging and the technical details, which leads to a little bit of potential stage fright or not being one of the first to scoop up an opportunity. So board confidence building is like a number one thing that we want to present as something to chat about with this group and discuss how we could potentially equip board members with the knowledge to feel more confident to volunteer in those capacities. So like I said, Ellie and I had a great chat. We have some ideas on this front, but before diving in, would just like to pause for a second. I saw a lot of nodding heads, so that makes me feel encouraged that we're on the same page kind of going into this conversation. But not being privy to your previous conversations on this topic, just wanted to see if there are any initial thoughts or contributions in response to this now marketing call for support to have more bodies that can help. Because when we do know that when folks talk about Maple Broadband to potential customers, those potential customers more than not want to sign up and want to subscribe.
I guess I'll jump in and say, so on, I think it was Sunday, there was the pop-up event at Lulu Ice Cream in Virgin's, and I dropped in for about an hour or hour and a half to assist. And I found that while I knew a lot of the people and were able to, say, hey, yeah, thanks for coming, a lot of the technical details I was a little deficient in and would say I'd keep people occupied while Ellie was dealing with somebody else. And then when she was free, I'd grab her and say, hey, this person has a question about X, Y, or Z. So I think having that training and getting to know some of the, even though I'm on the executive committee, there were a lot of details that I just, escaped me. So having some of that knowledge, expertise presented to us, or even having it available on like a one sheet or something like that might be really helpful and make it a little bit less daunting.
Thanks, Shannon. That's really helpful. And I have a question for you as a follow-up, but Nancy, I see your hand. So you can go
Well,
ahead
really
first.
along those same lines, I think that I start to imagine a frequently asked questions document
Hmm.
that has categories and bullet responses that so people would have that as a cheat sheet.
Hmm.
Might be comforting. I know it would be comforting to me. Um, and I think because Ellie and now Shannon really have experienced many of the frequently asked questions, it would be possible to, to fashion that pretty quickly.
Well, I was actually going to say, I was quite struck at this event by the fact that a lot of the feedback that we had was not frequently asked questions. It was very specific people. I mean, we had someone drive all the way from Shoreham to say, hey, like, I saw trucks on my road. Is that you building? I can't quite tell. And then we had someone else that had emailed me several times. There was the top of a. Anyway, I don't want to get the details here in public session, but the point of the matter is that I found that to be interesting just because it wasn't so much people asking comment. And that's one of the reasons I think that you were stuck, Shannon, is that you didn't get the easy questions. People who showed up are the people who had like the weird, oddball, unusual situations that in all likelihood you are going to need someone like me that's in the weeds to go and look into. And that's probably always going to happen, and that can be fine. We just need to again make sure part of the training is to say, all right, like let me take your details down and get back to you. And even some of them I had to take the details down to get back. Say like let me double check and I will get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because when board members are at an event, their advantage in many cases is, as Shannon's was, they're knowing who shows up, knowing some of the people who show up. And as long as someone who knows Shannon and knows how reliable a guy he is, hears that he's taking down the question, he's going to get back to them. That's a pretty good piece right there.
And so I'm on, the normal governing board, and representing specifically Ripton, and we're kind of the last on the list. So we've had a lot of questions without really any specific answers around a time frame. I think we've only just secured where we might even have a hub at this point. But with that said, like we have the town garage or the town recycling, and that is a community event at least once a month, every other month. And like I man it at least once a year, twice a year, usually during the cold months. But that's a great place in which all of our community members are coming through, as opposed to doing an event like at the town hall. We've been less successful in that unless there's a real draw in an advertisement and announcement. For me, I just need to have the specific talking points, and then I can BS my way kind of through everything, and be excited about it, and then be able to hand out, hopefully as part of like a marketing package with frequently asked questions, a cheat sheet, a business cards for Ellie or Steve, or business cards with the printed out the website so that people can go back, being able to collect emails and what is the process of passing those emails on to Ellie or Steve in a timely way. Developing those processes in ways of getting that information to each of us. And we may not be the perfect people to do it, but the other piece would be identifying the different, not necessarily events. Virgins has an event. Ripton does not have an event. Usually, we're pretty small. Brandon has events. I don't know if Shoreham does, and so partnering, identifying who our partners might be in helping to spread the word might be important too. Like the Conservation Commission I think it's Shoreham, is very active and does a lot of education and outreach. And so partnering with them as part of what they do on a monthly basis might be a good thing. So it's not a specific large event. It might be identifying smaller venues of interaction. But having a marketing package would be really beneficial with those talking points.
Awesome. Yeah, it's about you identified something that's really helpful there, because we've had conversations about the communities that do have their weekly recycling or weekly trash, like New Haven and Bristol, but those really aren't Maple Broadband territories and or areas that are concentrated enough for us to use our limited people power at those. So to hear that Ripton has something that wasn't on my radar, and that you would be open to that. I think that's another area where even board engagement, in that sense of we can do our research, we can get to know these communities, but there are those things that you Zapata are willing to participate in. I actually want to know about those more than the more popular events. I want the ones that people are willing to show up to, whether they already have a connection there, or just an event not an event. A place, a community gathering space that they regularly go to. So I think even being able to have those conversations with the board would be really helpful. I do want to share my screen briefly, because I'm really encouraged by what everyone's saying. For the fair, we had put together a volunteer guide that had some quick talking points. It had the frequently asked questions, and we certainly were on the more basic side of these questions. So also good to know, Shannon and Ellie, that you got more complex questions, and with a really a simple process to do exactly what you all are saying of great question, let me get you connected with someone. So I think there's also this component of needing to, at the very least, let folks know that there are these resources. Like, this is a very simple document that we want to share with volunteers. We're also developing and needs to go to Ellie's review and then get formally printed, but like a leave behind for folks that's more than just the pricing, but kind of has the values about Maple Broadband, the pricing, what the simple steps to getting installation, all of that stuff in one easy bifold. The thought originally for the design of that was, if we were able to get volunteers to do some door knocking, this would be that leave behind on the kitchen counter kind of piece, but that also comes with a lot of information as well. So helping folks build confidence beyond just having a training session that goes through the technical basics of what you offer and how it works and the service areas and what's next, but also reinforcing that there are supporting cue cards, and no one has to memorize it. If there's a question, I'm sure that the person asking the question is very happy to wait for someone to look up the answer, but maybe adding a couple of more complex things, because yeah, certainly sounds like Shannon folks are very are tech savvy or have very specific questions, and now they have access to Maple Broadband representatives, and so they're going to drive half the county to come ask that. Yeah, Nancy.
I represent a town that's within our responsibility, but it's WCVT territory, and that's Starksboro. And in terms of, I mean, I don't know what WCVT is how much urgency it is feeling, but I'm feeling quite a lot of urgency for our town. And so we need some of the same things for sure. And we also, in our town, a central place where we could leave information for people to take is the town clerk's office. But we need it to be tailored to the WCVT end of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly that tailoring. Ellie, I'm curious of your thoughts, and before I pass the mic to you, Ellie certainly received responses in her inbox from Porch Forum folks. If we're talking about a new launch area or like a new zone launch, active area, or even just promoting Maple Broadband, folks will say, oh, you're not in my town, so why are you putting this messaging in front of me? So you definitely want to be mindful about what that looks like and how that can help support the Maple Broadband efforts. Ellie, I think you were going to maybe say something.
Well, I think having a conversation with WCVT about the marketing in WCVT towns, I mean, we can invite them to another executive committee meeting to talk through that. But I think that one of the other topics we talked about is the distribution of yard signs and potentially, again, having the town clerk's offices or central locations in the towns where we are a service provider. But that, again, needs to be locally coordinated. And so I think, I mean, like this is a great kind of conceptual discussion, but what I really want to get to is how do we actually take this into an action plan to be able to see, because I mean, you can't push a piece of string, right? And not every person who's a good governing board member from a governance standpoint is really going to be excited to go out and volunteer at marketing and coordinate with town clerk, and that's fine. But we kind of want to figure out which of our delegates and representatives are willing and able to do that, and start to put them into place as soon as possible, and then figure out who isn't, right? Because some towns are more, I don't want to say more important than others, but we have more passings that are eligible for service in some towns than others. So Shoreham, Cornwall, Virgins, for example, Waltham, these pop to mind as ones where we have coverage in Orwell in almost all of the town. And so these towns are particularly important from an on the ground, boots on the ground kind of presence.
Yeah, and then and in that action plan, the reason it's so important to have one, and kind of doubling down on what Ellie's saying, is at this point we need to be present in the communities in these ways. So we need to either figure out how to get volunteers to support that, or do a cost benefit analysis of what we're missing, as far as new customers that might be lost, and paying for people hours to be present at these events. So from our perspective, it's very clear that we need to come out with a solution. It can't be one where it's like, okay, I guess we'll try to find more volunteer hours. We either need to sort of make a strong plan, and it might not have to be as forceful as committing board members to 2 events a year, or having them commit to hosting or coordinating yard signs in their town central location. But we either need to, all right, I am recommending that we either commit to a board engagement strategy and effort, or to potentially find funding to find folks that can be trained up and present in these community spaces.
So Ashley and Ellie, I'm not sure if it makes a difference or not, but I'll say bringing this to the larger board and asking, like, for example, I'm happy to go to the recycling center and man a table and provide information. I will not go and knock on people's doors, right? And that's a comfort level for myself and what I personally would like out of my community. I would not want a stranger knocking on my door and then handing me stuff. It feels like Jehovah's Witness kind of scenario. And it's like, nope, stay off my property, please. But at the recycling center, I'll teach you whatever you want me to teach them. And that's great. So one is to find out what people's comfort level is, and what materials are actually needed. So, both Shannon and I, and even Nancy, are like, having talking points is important. Having differences between, the W group and the Maple group is important, to be able to tease that out. And if we're doing installations, would it be inappropriate to have our customers that during the installation a yard sign is put up, no different than, say, a construction company putting up a lawn sign, and that it needs to remain in place, say, for a minimum of 2 weeks as part of their contractual agreement of installation? I don't know, but at least those stay visible even when myself and Shannon are not out providing education or handing out materials. The bifold is really good if it's something that you can hand to people, because a lot of times, anytime we're teaching about something, it feels overwhelming, and most people only retain one thing. And if you have a brochure that they can take and refresh their memory, have a discussion with a partner, be able to look up the website, I think continues and promotes that engagement.
Yep.
Absolutely. I'll let anyone else respond before I do. Yeah, Ellie, go ahead.
No, I think that's all great. Some of those are really good ideas. On the yard signs in particular, I'm a little bit hesitant on that just because of all the contractors WCBT uses that we asked them at one point, would they deliver customer welcome kits? And they said, we can't guarantee that we will reliably be able to do it. And they might get crumped on the bottoms of people's trucks and so on. And maybe we could push a little harder, but at the same time, it's one of those things where there's when it's like a sole proprietorship kind of plumber or something, they're probably a little bit more motivated to do it than this kind of a relationship, especially where there's multiple legs, right? I mean, there's us to WCBT to contractors, sometimes subcontractors. It's just hard to do it consistently, which is why we've been more focused on trying to find people who are interested in having yard signs up for a longer period of time. But maybe it's something we could revisit with them. I don't know, but I think I mean, we could probably continue this conversation for the entire rest of the meeting, but we actually have a lot more that we need to cover. So I think this is probably, we can continue this conversation. I'm just doing a little bit of clock management, maybe until 4:10 here. But I think maybe what I'd like to suggest is, I love the idea, Zapata, of maybe doing a survey to get people's interest levels for the different kinds of tasks that we have, and then maybe trying to get aces in their places with that sort of a thing. And I think the other thing that would probably be helpful is if the executive committee could think about having someone sign up to be a board liaison for this, just because, again, I got a zillion things going on, and it would also be nice to have someone other than me asking and twisting arms of other people on the governing board. So it would be nice to have a contact that Ashley and I could work with to take this concept and try and put together an action plan, and then be responsible for those governing board reach outs. Not that you need to volunteer this moment, but maybe that's something we can put on the docket for next time we meet, that you guys could take that up amongst yourselves to see which of you wants to put up your hand for that.
And we're aligned that the immediate recommendation is a survey of current board members for interest in capacity. So if we think that folks would be responsive to like an online survey, London Middlebury is happy to build it. Or if you think it's better to do it more conversationally, Ellie and team, you all can start the conversation there and report back. And then I would love to recommend scheduling some sort of board training for early fall, and that I think I chatted with Ellie, and it sounds like you all haven't had a board retreat before, but maybe you are able to do a morning board retreat where you get together in person, because our experience and my personal experience is whenever a board gets together, it feels so cumbersome to get folks together, but then it really reinvigorates folks around the mission, and you get realigned and you get to meet people in person that you've only seen on Teams. So that could be a good opportunity to do a couple of cheesy things like role playing even, but then come out being like, okay, we did this role playing, but I actually feel confident now that I can answer questions that folks might have. So I would leave that to the executive committee to see if that might be a way to engage the governing board at large. And thank you for letting me come today with requests and need, and not too many firm suggestions, just ideas.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Anyone have any final things for Ashley before she drops and we move on? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
See you
Ashley.
next week, Ashley.
Bye.
Ashley.
Okay, so the next item in the agenda, this was obviously there was the meeting on August 6th to talk about personnel matters, and the purpose of this is to codify for the public record for the audit the outcome of that.
Oh, okay. I was going to save that. We can do it twice, because I think, should it not also be covered at the governing board meeting?
I suppose it could be. We could just skip it for now and put it on the government.
Well, I'll cover it. I think what we're talking about is that on an annual basis, the executive committee meets to discuss performance of our executive director, and we've learned that it makes a lot of sense to have those conversations earlier in the year, so that the budget for the following year has time to be planned. I think the concern was that one year we did it and we made some decisions in November, and that was really making it difficult to get all the preparation for budgeting and whatnot done. So ultimately what we've done is we kind of selected to get this sorted out in August. So the executive committee did meet in it would have been this month. It would have been beginning of this month. And we had a productive conversation about our observations about our executive director's performance. Overall, we were very satisfied and are very satisfied with the executive director's performance. We also asked our executive director to provide some perspective on what that person saw as key items, key goals that we'd be looking to work towards next year. And those, I think, were taken very well as well. And at the conclusion of those discussions, this was held among not only the executive committee, but Lynn was also, our treasurer was also involved in those meetings. And at the conclusion of that, we collectively decided to continue to provide the same benefit package that the executive director receives now, which is a little uncertain because there's some, like health insurance is uncertain. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we felt obligated to continue to provide full health insurance coverage, dental service and coverage and whatnot, and also provide a salary increase of 4%. And that was all discussed in executive session, and then subsequently, I believe we discussed it, regardless of whether we did or not. We concluded that that was how we wanted to proceed. I spoke with the executive director. She was satisfied with the approach, and so that's kind of how it all went. Is there anything executive committee that I've missed there? Ellie, thoughts, comments?
Nope, I think that's sufficient for the record for the auditor. So
Yeah, good.
let's
Okay.
move on. Okay,
Do you
the
think,
next
Ellie,
item-
that it should? Do you think it should be? I honestly thought I was going to defer
Do we
it until
need, do we need a motion?
I think the board needs to approve it in the end. I don't think it's just or at least in the past, it was just approving what the executive committee had heard and given the nod to. But we needed to have the board, and it had to be recorded someplace that the board approved it. So I think that's the
Okay.
next meeting.
And so we've done part one there, and then when we have our meeting in September, I'll raise it again and we'll seek approval from the board.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for
I
the
think it
process
went really
clarification,
well.
Si.
Thank you, Ellie.
It only comes up once a year, so we all forget what we have to do to make sure that there's no
Yeah.
pushback from the powers that be. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is construction grants extension. So I was, as part of the 2024 audit, I was doing a number of things, including getting confirmation from VCUB of our construction grant invoices for last year and so on and so forth, and looking at those agreements. And in so doing, I was reminded that our town ARPA match was a amendment to our construction grant. And our construction grant, we are planning to wrap up our obligations under the original construction grant by the end of this year, weather and permitting. But the current end date of our construction grant is 12/31/2025, so it's the end of this year. And we will definitely not have spent our town ARPA match by the end of this year. We have specifically withheld spending that because we want to understand what's going on with BEAD. And if we get BEAD or don't get BEAD, we'll use that money differently. So having identified this, I thought it would be a good idea to get the approval of this August committee to put in a request to the Vermont Community Broadband Board to extend the end date of our construction grants. I would suggest extending it to the end of third quarter of next year or the end of September of next year, as long as they will reasonably allow for the ARPA grants, just to give us as much time as possible legally and contractually. So I don't really think there's too much debate here. I can't see any reason why we would not do this. I can't see any reason why we would pick an earlier date, but it's obviously not up to my discretion to do this without approval. So I'm bringing it before you folks.
Ellie,
Makes total sense.
Are you bifurcating the ARPA construction grant and the town contributions as separate drop dead date? Are they all are you suggesting the whole package has the same end date?
It's all one grant, Steve.
Okay.
So it all has one end date.
Okay. Well, I move we ask our executive director to extend a query to the Vermont Community Broadband Board to extend the end date of our ARPA grant out to the third quarter of 2026. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Everyone's seconding it.
Lots of seconds.
Any
yeah.
discussion? All in favor? I think that was all of you.
Aye.
All right. And I can see you now. I've moved my laptop. I get a little bit of a better angle. Polarization is still a thing, apparently. Okay, great. So the next item, so it's 4:16. This item could take us probably 3 hours to talk through it. I'm going to suggest that we cap this at a 20-minute discussion. That should give us enough time to go through a little bit of the conflict of interest policy and then cover the other updates. So that would put us at 4:35, so 19 minutes. So I distributed to all of you the totality of the long drop RFA. I'm not sure if anyone or everyone read it. It's a short document, but it's a little bit dense, sometimes a little bit repetitive. There's a couple things that I found to be internally inconsistent that I flagged to VCBB. They had a Q&A yesterday in the Vacuda board meeting, so there was a number of questions, and some of them they are going to come back to us on. Having said that, as it currently stands, the application window opens next week Friday and closes 2 weeks from then. And I want to be prepared to submit something even in the midst of massive uncertainty. So here we are. And the other thing as well is just a little bit of backstory here is, if you will recall, the VCB has a bit of a history of being overly prescriptive, or I shouldn't, overly is a weighted term, being incredibly prescriptive with the requirements of grantees. And one of the bits of feedback from Vacuda is we said, please be a little bit less prescriptive with this, because the state is very different. Our business models are different. The Northeast Kingdom is not the same as Addison County. So please give us a little bit of discretion. And I think the pendulum has swung a little bit far towards a lot of discretion. So we are and will be talking in Vacuda as everyone else is going through similar conversations around, okay, like here's some of the things and here's how our CUD is handling it. But so I'm not asking you guys necessarily to make any final decisions today unless you want to on these topics. And there may be other things, other questions that come up. I'm almost certain there will be. One of the things that I alluded to in my mail is it would probably not be a bad idea to have a brief meeting next week solely on this topic, when we've all had a chance to review it more. There's perhaps more clarity back from VCBB, and we can talk through, because there's policy questions, there's also process questions, like how the heck are we actually going to do this? I've got some ideas, but haven't fully thought it through. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. We can't use this time slot next week because we have finance committee, but if people are willing in general, then I can send out a doodle poll of times that work for me and see if we can't find an hour that works for others as well. Yes, no?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, my Wi-Fi froze at that exact second when you all would have been nodding at me.
We're all in
Okay,
agreement.
great. Okay, so so Nancy, you have your hand up, but I thought we might just go through the document I distributed with the policy questions from top to bottom and get some initial thoughts.
Great. I thought your sending those questions was really helpful. And I also want to start by saying I think the grant application is obnoxiously difficult. I mean,
You said it, I didn't.
Especially the timeline. I mean, that's such. Never mind. But anyway, so thank you for the pieces that you also sent. But then I went through that carefully, what you sent, and then I went through the actual request for applications, and my blood was boiling. But I'm okay now.
That's good. I'm the same as you, Nancy. I always like to be smiling my way through the day.
Yeah.
No matter what the circumstances.
Right.
Okay.
Well, Ellie,
so with that,
before we get into
ahead,
great
Sai.
discussion, it's just thank you very much for, I mean, I read through that whole document twice and I had a lot of the same questions, but you sifted them down into very specific things, which is very helpful. They're not easy to answer, but at least it's sort of, yeah. And it's irksome really to look at what they're asking for, but thank you very much for sort of getting this document in place. It's really helpful.
Thank you. My pleasure. What I want to do is actually go through the documents, like literally paragraph by paragraph, and pull out like assumptions or things that might need to happen and group them into policy versus process versus research. I simply haven't had the time to do that yet, but that's the work that I need to do. But one of my focuses was getting out some of the policy questions, plucking out the big ones, the big kind of obvious ones, so that we could at least start to think about them. So, with that as an introduction, the first one the first one is really just kind of a commentary showing that we don't. So there's three kinds of preferred addresses or preferred addresses. One is manufactured home communities, and we pass exactly one right now. We don't have mainline that goes through it because all those addresses are considered to be served, and because they're considered to be served, and I know the RFA says maybe mainline might be considered and maybe campus solutions might be considered. We don't have time to put together a campus solution like some sort of a Wi-Fi thing with this little time. And even if we did, I would be disinclined to do so for one manufactured home park. Yes?
Can I ask one question about that? Maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is that manufactured home communities could also be considered like mobile home parks. Would that be true? Because the Addison Housing Works has a total of 9 that are identified within Addison County. And are you saying then that only one of those 9 meet this eligibility criteria for our purposes?
That's a great clarification. 7 of them fall into WCVT's ILEC footprint, and so they're customers, not our customers. And by the way, WCVT's policy is to provide a drop at no cost to the consumer everywhere. So we previously discussed this some months ago, and they said they weren't planning to apply to this program because it didn't apply to them because it's meant to cover costs in excess of the standard installation fee. The standard installation fee is 0. It's not really much that you can actually be applying for. So that covers 7. And then there are 2 that are in our territory. One of them is in Waltham, New Haven, Virgins, something like that, southeast of Virgins. That's the one that we pass now. It's off Green Street. And the other one is in Middlebury, East Middlebury, and we do not have network anywhere near there. So it does apply, but that route, I think we would be covering under BEAD if we get BEAD, but not those addresses because they're considered to be served already. So,
thank you.
Yep. So that's why I plucked this one out, is we have main line going down the road, but we don't have any main line through the park itself. And from my understanding of the VCB's overbuild rules, that would anyway be excluded. There is a thing at the end where they kind of want us to go and check the actual accuracy of the served status of all the addresses, which I'm planning to just ignore and suggest that other CUDs do the same because there's just not enough time. And even if there was, I don't think that's appropriate for us to be doing. The state should be doing that. Anyway, so that's the manufactured home communities. So the second 2 categories is lower income Vermonters and then households that are in the pipeline that have not taken service because of cost, which is presumably everyone that's in the pipeline now who needs conduit, who has not already taken the initiative to install conduit at their own cost and expense. And we have 152 of them as of now, as the last time I checked. Some of those may well have gone with other services. We don't know, but some chunk of them I know for a fact are still very interested and would love some assistance. So it's great that those are prioritized. So for the lower income Vermonters, we have to define what we mean by lower income and what criteria we use. Separately, as you know, I've got conversations going on with CVOEO to see if they will do the validation. So separately, we have to figure out who's going to do the validations. That's a process, but let's not worry about that now. Let's assume that someone will do it. The question is, what criteria do we wish to use to define eligibility under lower income?
And I thought your suggestion that first one was fine and the other 2 could be self-certified.
Yep. So that was my suggestion, is that we have a certification of income guidelines. We have self-certification for 2 other things that I think are reasonable. But again, it's a policy question. Do we wish to limit this to people who live in Vermont or not? You could decide either way. My suggestion was to limit it to people who live in Vermont and people who attest that they have under $1 million of liquid assets.
Well, the manufactured homes specifically called it out as a primary residence, and I think that there should be a level of consistency across all of our client base. And I think that would be at least for me, the justification for that. And to be quite honest, if you have a second home in Vermont, then you should not be meeting a low income eligibility, or renting it out as an Airbnb as a separate source of income. I would see that as a business requirement that you would incur upon your own costs as running that business. So personally, I would say it needs to be a primary residence.
I'm not going to argue with that. Actually, so I mean, if your suggestion is to change number 2 from live in Vermont to have this location be your primary residence, I think that's a good suggestion. And again, it would be a self-attestation, because this is actually one of the questions we had open to VCB. I think it was the multi-dwelling units and the mobile home parks, or mobile manufactured homes, they wanted to make sure it's primary residence. And I said, well, what evidence needs to be provided? Because you can't, I mean, there's homestead declarations, but not everyone has those, and certainly not for a tenant, a renter. So they didn't know, but maybe we'll. So I think for now, self-attestation is fine, because we don't want to put up undue barriers. And yeah, okay. So it sounds like we have some agreement on that. So the next question then is, and I think maybe what we'll do is we'll get consensus on what we can, and eventually we'll write this all down and codify it and vote on it. So let's not get too hung up in these things right now. Okay, and then the second thing in there as well is my suggestion that we link the broadband subsidies that we have in our budget with the eligibility under the DROP program, because I think that was already our intent. We have money in our budget we actually have money in our budget for installations. We have money in our budget for monthly subsidies for eligible households. We've just never had a way to qualify them before. But politically, it would be very difficult if we said, hey, there's money for us to put a drop to your home. Oh, but now you can't afford the service. So, and this is something that could be refined, because we've also never set a policy on what that subsidy should be. And again, I don't know that we need to be solving this second, but I just want to put that thought in your heads as well, that I think what we'd before suggested is we kind of copy paste from ACP. We qualify households. If they qualify, they get $30 off a month. We can probably refine from there. Okay, I see some nodding heads. Okay, all right, so the next question is, what eligibility criteria exactly do we want to go with? So what NECA is using is they're using 200% of federal poverty level. Krista was actually talking about for her subsidies for any KCV for having that, for allowing up to maybe 300% of poverty level. But we need to set a level, an income level, and then also eligibility for these other things. And now that I'm looking at it, we might want to add that childcare financial assistance program as one as well, because I tell you what, if you've jumped through the hoops of that one, then actually maybe not, because they have it up to like 600%. For partial subsidies. Go ahead,
Ellie,
Si.
will you just confirm for me that when we say poverty level, we're talking about the national poverty level?
FPL,
Yeah.
Yep, federal poverty level.
200 times that is still 0, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's
So,
not.
Well, I mean, again, this is a policy choice here. You guys can set it whatever you want. You could also, by the way, set a different federal poverty level for the subsidies as for the drops, right? Because this drop money is basically free. But the other thing as well is that it requires us to give preference to again, this is actually one of the internal inconsistencies. It requires us to preference low-income households, and then later on it says that we must serve all low-income households before we serve any of the other households, which is kind of problematic, because what about areas that we haven't built to yet, or people who might be low-income who aren't in the system yet, and they aren't in the system because they think they can't afford it? So that's a whole rat's nest. So yeah, we've got 5 minutes left in this discussion, so maybe let's that's something that needs to be decided. So the next couple of questions really relates to, how do we decide of the people who are already in the system who are needing conduit, who actually needs financial assistance? So how do we determine need? Is it based on income only, some mix of income and liquid assets? Because you could, for example, you could be retired with almost no income or just a little bit of Social Security income, but have a really big stock portfolio that's liquid, right? Like, who knows? What about renters, when the value that would be accruing is not going to the person living in the household? And there's a lot of nuance here. And then related is, do we want there to be a sliding scale? I don't know. You guys have all had a chance to read these questions, so I probably shouldn't be reading them out, but how do you guys want to use the next 5 minutes? I'll shut up and let you talk. Nancy.
Well, some of my response, several of my responses to your questions were sending you the question, what do we know about how NEK is handling this issue? Just because I'm guessing they have more experience and thought put into it than we have had yet. So that was one thing. But you know, when I got thinking about renters and the value that accrues to, say, a mobile home park owner, if conduit goes to it, it just made me wonder about whether it's possible to get owners to put some money up, because whether the renters stay or don't, our having put conduit in makes makes their place, their mobile home park more desirable and more valuable.
Oh, their property. I mean, there's more nuances to this too. I mean, we're not putting a conduit anywhere unless there's an easement, because we're not putting in a conduit if we don't own the conduit. And if there's a renter and the property owner doesn't wish there to be an easement or doesn't wish there to be a conduit, then we're not doing anything.
Right.
But just to clarify, Nancy, NEK, they're as new to this as we are of applying for this drop program. So
Yeah.
they've been doing subsidies, but these policy questions don't really apply to monthly subsidies.
Right. Okay.
It's all about the person who lives there.
Okay. But do you picture, so in a situation where we're talking about renters, whether it's a mobile home park or just renting a house, and the renters aren't the owners, what's your thinking about whether there's a chance we can build in a negotiation process with the owner of the property?
Well, we can do whatever we want, but it's going to take time and cost money.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the good news is that this program has allowable costs for contracted services and staff time and whatnot. So we could, if you guys wish to do something like that, we could model out, okay, great, let's assume that it's going to cost us however many hours of someone, and we have to figure out who that someone is, because it's not going to be me, I don't have the time, but I'm sure we could outsource it, or we could have a part-time resource somewhere, like the Regional Planning Commission or somewhere that does that. But we just need to be aware that all these things have costs and complexity. I know.
Well, do you think that's a level of complexity that's not reasonable, though? Do you think that's a level of complexity that we shouldn't worry about?
I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I do think that we're going to need a separate set of rules for renters versus owners.
Yeah.
And I do think that the owner of a property, they're getting some value from it, and there should be some sort of a quid pro quo. Whether that's shared cost or something.
Yeah.
There should be something. I don't know what that something is, because we don't want the barriers to be so high that the property owners don't do it and then the renters are left out in the cold.
Right.
So we've got 2 minutes left. We definitely need more time to think about this. Does anyone have any really firm opinions or anything on here that you just fundamentally didn't understand, or anything that you had a violent reaction to one way or the other, agreement or disagreement?
So Ellie, I went through it because I really wanted to be able to understand it, in being able to participate in the meeting. And so for like policy question number 1 under the low income Vermonters, I think having those federal programs in place where there's already a check and balances and documentation required that allows for the verification of those services that is already built in is pretty important. And how that then applies to the immediate conversion customers, I don't know that we want to be in the business of doing income verifications. I think that can become really cumbersome, and then can start incorporating a variety of income streams, stock portfolio, all those other pieces, and to what point. So that was something that I was like, I don't know that we want to be in that business. We should be piggybacking on existing structures and programs. Same with about the renters. I felt strongly that needs to be an investment by the owners, and maybe that's a point of education and outreach, is identifying those buildings that are renting or that are renting and are considered low income, because there's also a difference there. So, and that's also where the whole idea of, is it fair and equitable for there to be a cliff, or is a sliding scale more appropriate? I think that actually comes down to more capacity and process, and whether or not Maple Broadband is able to assimilate the information to decide to be able to offer a sliding scale. I think that there is having some flexibility around that. Makes us more nimble to respond to the market conditions for folks. And I think that kind of supports the community aspect. Policy question 4 about properties placing conduit, not the lowest cost option. If somebody doesn't want the lowest cost option, then they should be able to pony it up. I feel strongly about that. And yes, absolutely. I think we need to exclude second homes or premises that are not occupied year round, regardless of what category you fall into. And then minimum service commitment. I mean, I don't think that it's unreasonable to ask for at least a 6 months commitment, but that also gets back to your question about if you're low income and we're now hooking you up, can you actually afford the service? And I think that's a broader conversation that needs to happen before we make that decision.
Yep. I think that's great. Thank you. And just one final comment before I move us on, because we are over time now, is that it is a requirement under the RFA that we exclude people who do not genuinely need financial assistance to obtain service. So we somehow have to figure out what that looks like. And I think that the people who qualify for assistance programs are going to be very low income, but there's middle income people who genuinely need service. So we're going to have to figure out how to square that circle. All right. So hopefully we can find a time that meets, or that works to meet next week. We do have more time, but there's a lot more to go through here. Thank you guys for that so far. Okay, so the next thing up here, this is the conflict of interest policy. So the state of Vermont, they passed a law last year that essentially, if you guys read the briefing notes that I linked in the agenda, it applies to all municipal entities, including us, and apparently it overrides our ability to have our own separate conflict of interest policy. So in the interest of time, I'm not sure that we're going to want to be getting too much into detail and take action on this, but I did want to put it on here for your awareness and ask you perhaps to read that in a little bit more detail, both the statute and the briefing note. Shannon, do you have something to say?
I was just going to say that usually when we're superseded like that, we can just in our bylaws say that we must adhere to the latest version of, and then leave it at that, and that usually works.
Yeah, I actually like that better than what I was going to say, Shannon, because right now we have a conflict of interest policy. We could copy and paste what's actually prevailing, but that then might result in some confusion when the current prevailing policy changes. So
Exactly.
to your point, if we just kind of point to it,
Exactly.
it saves us from having to change it all the time, and that would be I'd be all for that.
I did want to point out that there's a training requirement in there that applies to all municipal officers. So you guys have a month to get yourself trained.
Didn't it, that advisory you also included, Ellie, it suggested that CUDs, I didn't really quite understand that, but it was a question was raised whether it applied to CUDs, and then they said, well, however, and I didn't quite follow that. Is it we're responsible for it too? Training?
I think that's why we all need to read the statute more carefully and come back with what we think are the implications for our district. So I'm going to leave this on the agenda for the next time we meet. Okay. If you guys don't mind, I put the proposed executive session next just because I thought we might have guests, but let's swap that order around so we can do the updates, and then we can essentially go into executive session at the end with whatever time we have left, and then we can just come out to adjourn. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so updates under BEAD. I've actually already given I've given the non-update updates already in my executive director's report. That we understand what's going on with the timeline. We have not heard anything. I have a few other things to say that I'll say in executive session. 2024 audit. So it's been a very busy 2 weeks since the last time we met. My goodness, we had Lynn, do you want to cover this? I've been doing a lot of talking. You've been doing a lot of work too.
Yeah. Anyway, the good news is we asked Bonnie to fast track the 2024 audit. Bonnie said yes, she would put it at the top of her list. And then she sent us an overwhelming request for documentation and stuff. So last week, Ellie, Darlene, Sai, maybe you sent some stuff too, but it was really quite overwhelming. But it's all in. And then was it this morning or yesterday?
It was yesterday. It was like 2 p.m. yesterday or something.
She sent the next wave of overwhelming information, and I did not see it till this morning. And just kudos to Darlene and Ellie, because they pretty much sent everything Bonnie needs.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, it really was something else. And I just sat and read this long exchange. And so anyway, I was totally impressed early this morning at how quickly you and Darlene got on that list. And I did see Darlene at noontime today. And all that stuff she asked for today is all the testing. And so if she gets through that, she may not have a lot more questions. She may, but she may not. And that's really good. And she is committed to getting this wrapped up. She hasn't told us when yet, but it's only August 20th. So I'm feeling hopeful, unless something that I have no idea what it would be. Ellie, what
I'm also feeling good. I mean, it took us only slightly more than 24 hours to respond to her next 10 set of requests. So most of that was Darlene. There's only a couple I had to work on. I also drafted the management discussion and analysis so that we'd have that ready ahead of time, rather than we get the whole thing and then she asks for this. So I did that last week or something like that.
Mhm.
So we're ahead of the game with that. Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think something that Lynn might have said when we recently spoke, perhaps in executive session, please confirm that this is the single audit. Is that true? And
Single audit, yes.
I think what Lynn had said was that this has to be done. This is a prerequisite for BEAD if we are awarded BEAD, and that places a deadline on it of the end of next month.
Yeah, and Ellie's the one that brought that deadline to our attention, and Bonnie is paying attention to that. I mean, it's like, we don't need it, we can't still be talking about it. It needs to be finished and in our hands.
It needs to be submitted to the Federal Clearinghouse by then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just for the executive committee's benefit, I mean, Lynn has quickly and frequently attested to Ellie's ability to handle this kind of massive work, but I've taken it on myself when Ellie asked me for some backup information that I'm sure was related to the audit. That's my top priority, because I don't know how she's going to get it all done anyhow. And we're talking about the affordable drop program, and to me, she shouldn't be doing that. She should be working on the audit.
Well, I totally agree, and I can tell you, I just have this image of Darlene and Ellie just at it, uploading all this stuff. And the good news is Darlene is a superstar bookkeeper. I've said this before. She's not even a bookkeeper, she's an accountant. And she's also meticulous about her records and is able to often put her hands on things and to, these are not mindless activities. I'll give you a quick, for instance, we pay, when we pay an invoice sometimes, or a company, like Syracuse, multiple invoices are being paid. And the auditor needs to see all of those invoices that were part of that payment. And so between Ellie and Darlene, they have the capacity and the capability and expertise to just retrieve that information quickly. So, you know, as the treasurer, I'm delighted with that level of detail and that ability to retrieve like that. And, you know, the auditor, I imagine, is, you know, that's helpful. So if these, we were asked, all the testing is what just happened. And, you know, I don't think there's anything hanging out there. You know, I thought there was one thing, but maybe that's a no. It was something about the inventory, but whatever.
Yep, that was the last thing. That's in. And thank you to Sai, who Sai as well got me one invoice that I couldn't find.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a team effort, and I want to tell you, in terms of like the testing stuff, I did zero other than read a very long email this morning about that piece. So I'm feeling not even cautiously optimistic. I'm optimistic that unless we hear something from Bonnie by Friday, she's got a team of people working through all of this. I think we're in good shape. So,
Yep.
anyway, well done, Ellie.
I think so as well. Thank you. Well done to Darlene.
Yeah.
Okay, so next on the agenda is Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee met, I believe, right after the last Executive Committee, and we went through the document which was to be presented to the VCBB in executive session. And I got some feedback, very good feedback from the Finance Committee on that, answered their questions. And our next meeting is set for next week, Wednesday, when we are going to be diving in more detail to the financial models distributed, and we will hopefully have a sense by then of whether we should be focusing more on the BEAD or the non-BEAD model. So that's the Finance Committee.
The project is set for September 8th. I've got the all the necessary resources aligned to do what needs to be done. Contractor and an engineering firm will be participating in it, and I plan on spending time on site. I'm thinking, I haven't looked at the calendar, but I'm thinking that when we have our next governing board meeting, I might have some snapshots to show people about what happened, because I think I'm feeling pretty confident it's going to go really, really, really fast, which will save us some money. So that's good. So that's it.
Great. Okay, 2025 construction update. So the update here is that Syracuse is going to have a splice crew back in the state next week. They were hoping they just didn't have. They've had a bunch of outages and emergency situations. So the cable and the strand has been up for the areas where we have licenses. There's a couple miles we're building now, Zapata, about 3 miles or something like that. Maybe it's like 3 miles with ARPA and 2 miles with town ARPA, something like that. There's just a couple of miles of line extensions. So the splice crew is going to be up next week, and I've been setting expectations with customers that it's likely to be mid-September. So that's where we're at with that. Go ahead.
Question, Ellie. When we have the contractors coming out, you know, they say Syracuse, does Maple Broadband have one of those like big magnets that they can put on the sides of their doors? Only because, I mean, people are asking, right? I mean, it's very clear when Fidium is in the area and doing work. And I'm just wondering if that is one easy way in which to be advertising Maple Broadband's presence in the area in a I'll say a very noticeable way.
Yeah, we have historically done that. And actually, I'm honestly not sure, because we've been getting mails from people saying that they see our trucks, which implies to me that Syracuse has taken it upon themselves to make sure that the magnets are on the trucks. But we also had a hard time enforcing it because, you know, different trucks come through and sometimes people. So again, it's a little bit hard to get 100%, but also this is a really small build. I mean, if we're doing 100+ miles, it's more reasonable to be on them to make sure that the magnets are on the trucks. So for this little one, I frankly didn't even bring it up, but I do agree with you in general. That's something that we're doing. But we also have anyone who's entered an order in these areas that we're building, we have their mails in the system. We've been mailing them, telling them what's going on. And when the thing flips into active service, they'll be getting more automated mails. Steve?
Yeah, so you and I exchanged text messages about this, and so this is my opportunity to remind you. Part of our process, when we say we're done with a build, an area of our service area, it's VCBB's one of their final tasks is to review what we've done, what we've installed. And they send out a third-party contractor called Bluck Grove is the name of the company. I think they're based in New York. And they go out and check everything we've done. And it's been some missteps on that. I know that they did complete their work on phase 1A. And what Ellie has told me is, and what happens is once that gets signed off by Luck Grove, there may be some other intervening steps, but ultimately we get some money as a result of that. They no longer have to hold back any funds. So when I had asked Ellie about phase 2, which from my perspective is done, but Ellie says it's not. And I think part of phase 2 may well be all these piece parts that we're doing right now. Is that true?
Yes. And if you don't mind, so what I talked about with Steve is I want to call up our construction grant and show you guys the grant disbursement milestones. Never you mind that this is a reimbursement-based grant. But I want to show you guys those milestones and then show you where, because if you look at the dashboard, you can see we've already received the vast majority of our construction grant amount. But I want to show you guys the actual milestones and how they relate to the work we're doing. I think it would be better to do that in executive session. And so I think, if you don't mind, we'll kick that into executive session. Is there anything in the parking lot? I have nothing in the parking lot I want to call out. So I'd be happy for us to go into executive session now, and then we can talk about BEAD, and I'll show you the construction grant.
So we're going to do that now then?
Yep.
Ellie, do you want me to stay on or should I sign off at this point?
Nope. You if the board welcomes you into executive session, you are welcome in, and Matthew as well.
Zapata, this is very helpful, and I think I'm hoping you and I, or maybe you and Ellie, can talk about any concerns you've got, so that we can figure out if we can bring you on or if we need to move on. So absolutely, I think this will help you with your understanding. I move to find that premature general public knowledge regarding Maple Broadband's business strategy would clearly place us at a substantial disadvantage because it risks disclosure of our activities if they were to be communicated to the public. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second from Shannon. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay. I move that we enter into executive session to discuss business strategy under Title I, Section 313, subsection A of the Vermont statutes. Is there a second? I got a second from Nancy. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Okay, we're now in executive session. I'm stopping the recording.